So here's my argument. I believe that camp is more relevant and important now than it's ever been. That I think it is a transformative youth development tool. The big challenge is, for the last 150 years, we have not fully understood that which we do. But I want to talk about both what we do and why we're more relevant now than we've ever been before. So I'm going to break this up into 3 parts. Part 1 is a tectonic shift, a tectonic trend that's happening in our lives that we can't stop that influence our children. The second is a second tectonic trend. You know what I mean by tectonic? Like tectonic plates, that you can't stop them. They're going to move or they're going to move. And the third is, how does camp help us address these challenges? How does camp become a partner in the parenting process? How does camp help create advantage for our children, which is ultimately, as parents, what we want to do? Okay, so my first tectonic trend has to do with my friend. The total immersion in technology is a big deal that we're needing to deal with. And as I was preparing my TED Talk a week and a half ago, I was running through my notes. I was trying to think what to do. This about a month ago, when I saw that Neil Armstrong died. And I'm looking at the pictures and Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon, and suddenly it hit me. We're all becoming like Neil Armstrong. And here's what I mean by that. If you look at that picture with him on the moon, with the limb reflected in his visor, in that ridiculous suit up on the moon, he was in a cocoon of technology, absolutely enveloped in this cocoon. And it not only kept him safe, but enabled him to communicate all the way back to Earth. Through the cameras, he was brought into every one of our living rooms. So in that moment, here's this guy on the moon, in this cocoon of technology, and he's absolutely connected to us. Anyone old enough, if you had a television, you were watching it. If you didn't have a television, you were in your neighbor's house. And we were there with him. We were connected to this person in this cocoon of technology. So connected, in fact, that he even told us this, right? This is a giant leap for mankind. He was walking for us as well. So here he was, in one hand, connected to every one of us. Yet on the other hand, more alone and isolated than anyone has ever been, period. There's one other human being within 400,000 miles. I think more and more we're becoming enveloped in our own cocoons of technology that make us hyper-connected. We're connected to every idea, every person in the world, via our phones, the internet, and television. But while we are on one hand incredibly connected, we are also more isolated and alone than we have ever been. I'm talking to some doctors, says I'm seeing more depression from people who are alone, who are working from home. Let's talk for a second what this cocoon looks like if you're a teenager in America. Have y'all read the Pew Research number on this? How many hours a week does a teenager look at an electronic screen? Now realize I think it was 118 hours a week, 124 hours, I can't remember exactly. And we're going to school for about 50 of them. So we've got about, and we're going to sleep for some of them, I'm checking, right? So you've got a handful of hours where you're awake and not at school. I'm depressed to tell you that the number of hours the average teenager spends looking at an electronic screen is 53 hours a week. 11 of which will be spent texting. They will send and receive 3,700 texts a month. And if you've ever read these things, this is not exactly Shakespeare, right? Well, no, why am I concerned about this? I'm concerned because I believe that all real human interaction, all real joy comes from real interpersonal relationships. Our friendships, our marriages, our teams, it's when we're here. And these connections actually require a series of skills. How do I read your body language? How do I resolve conflict? How do I show empathy? How do I control my body language in a way that's either threatening or not threatening? Vocal intonation. How to read people. This is a series of skills. And like every other skill, it requires practice. Okay, so what happens when this becomes this? I'm just not practicing as much. The same thing happens if I stop playing golf or I stop playing tennis. I just get less good at it. So the skills, if they don't atrophy, though I personally think they do atrophy, they at least don't get better. Now you might say, well, that affects us on the personal relationships, but it's also critical in the workplace. And before you discount me as a technophobic romantic, after all, I'm a camp guy. I've spent way too much money with Apple Corporation. I like my electronic toys. I understand fully what technology can do for us. But I also understand its limitations. And it's not just me now. It's not just the handful of us who are spending time with children and noticing it. There's an organization out there called the Partnership for 21st Century Skills. Real simple website, p21.org. And they noticed about 8 years ago that high school and college graduates were entering the workforce with a deficit of skills. So the first thing is, what are the skills that we're missing? Let's figure out what those skills are, assess where the deficits are, and what we can do about it. These included almost everyone you would ever want your child to work for, except for maybe Google. Google's the only name I look for that's not there. You got Sesame Street on there, you got Lego, you've got Intel, Dell, Apple, Microsoft, Marriott, Ford, great names. And they're saying people are coming into the workplace without the right skills. Before I tell you what the key skills are, I will tell you this, and this blew me away when I read it, that Singapore threw out the educational curriculum that had made them the #1 rated school system in the world after reading the study and redesigned their curriculum around it. So what are the key skills? Well, if you look at the list, it's a love letter to summer camps. And I'll get more to that in the third section, but I'll tell you the #1 skill is oral communication. Your ability to listen to and persuade another human being. #2 is collaboration. Your ability to get together with a group of people, often not of your choosing, develop a goal, have a plan, execute that plan, and do so as a group. Or another way, little things like, I've got a ball of duct tape. Find a way to make a game out of it. And the reason this is important, they say, is that 10 years ago they were in the phone business. Now you're in the handheld computer business. That changes the way you approach things. You can't just teach somebody a skill and let them do it for 40 years. The environment is constantly adaptive. It's constantly changing. So the skills you need are oral communication, collaboration, work ethic. Technical skills are on the list. They're not in the top 10. But leadership is. Creativity is. Basically skills that are not well learned, and this is in deference to Dave and Susie. I used to say not well taught in school. I'll say they're not well taught in the classroom. But dynamic educational environments create ways to help provide these skills. I call camp a dynamic educational environment. Okay, so you've got, we know these skills are critical. We know these skills are important. And ironically, the very technology that's changing the world is mitigating our skill level. I'll tell you one quick story and I'll go to the next tectonic trend. I have a fantastic young man who used to be a counselor and a member of a leadership team that now works in student affairs at Indiana University. And he was adjudicating a problem between two freshman roommates that could not get along. And they were so mad that they were flaming each other every hour on Facebook. So I want you to visualize this in your head. I see them in a darkened room, illuminated only by the pale glow of their laptops, typing furiously and never once turning around and talking to the other person. And I started to laugh when he told me the story, and he said, it's not that unusual. Okay, so there's trend one. We have technology, and the immersive element of it is taking away the very skills that we need in a technologically adaptive and changing world. Okay, trend number two, is what I'm always a little more reluctant on, is what I will call excess parenting. You've heard about the helicopter parents, the parents who are fighting their children's battles for them. And let me start by saying, I think that every act of parenting, except for like abuse, but most acts of parenting come from a place of love. We love our children. We want them to have every advantage possible, particularly in a world that we are competing globally. And we don't want them to experience pain. I mean, I think that's a fairly good list. The problem is, it creates some issues we hadn't fully understood. That when we, in fact, decide, oh, my daughter's really struggling with that teacher, I better go switch teachers. The son's really struggling in science, so I'm going to help him do his work for him. Oh, you don't want to fulfill your obligation? That's okay. You don't have to fulfill your obligations. This is leading to a different set of behaviors that are suboptimal. I'll give you a few examples. I have a very good friend of mine who is an RA at Harvard. And he says the biggest problem we have with freshmen is that they show up with parents in tow. The parents are renting hotel rooms, not for a day, but for a month. His biggest problem as an RA was getting the parents kicked out of the dorms. How humiliated would you be if your mom was hanging around your dorm room your freshman year? Now, you don't mind because she's hanging out with everyone else's mom. I have a friend of mine who's a professor, and he said the very first time this happened about 12 years ago, and I come in and you're the professor, and I want to tell you I wasn't really happy with that grade. I got it. Well, hold on. My mom wants to talk to you. All I can say, if I were tenured, I would say, did I say B minus? I'm at a C plus. Do you want to talk any more about this? We actually have some of our applicants will have their applications sent in by their parents for college-age workers. Where's this coming from? And if you ask the deans of students, they say one of the biggest problems they have are what they call teacups. Kids who come without any of the coping skills to deal with adversity. So the very first time something bad happens, they chip like a teacup. We want our children to be rubber balls, not teacups. Okay, so there's sort of two solutions here that are both kind of counterintuitive. Solution one is less is more. Right? The second one is the key to success is some failure. Okay, so I'm going to go through the first one. Less is more. Have any of you ever heard of Michael Thompson? Okay, well, actually, Michael Thompson will be doing a talk that we're sponsoring. It's just not me talking, this will be Michael talking. I believe the 12th or 13th of November. I think it's going to be at ESD. And he recently wrote a book called Homesick and Happy. His big book he wrote was Raising Cain. It's still considered probably the definitive boy book out there. He also wrote The Pressured Child, Best Friends, Worst Enemies. He is the local psychologist at Belmont Hill, which I believe is still the prep school that sends the most people to Harvard. Okay, so he is constantly talking with parents in kind of the overachiever bracket. And he says the single biggest question he gets over and over and over again is some version of this. What else can I do for my children? What more can I do for my child? What am I not doing that I should be doing? And the answer always implies there's more to do. By the way, did y'all know that we spend 20 hours a week more with our children than our parents did? A lot more. And that's good most of the time. But he says there are a handful of things that we cannot do for our children. In his book, he lists 8 of them. And for fear that I will forget them, I wrote them down. He says the first thing is that we cannot make our children happy. We cannot give our children high self-esteem. By the way, you should know there's a paper written in 1968 that said that self-esteem correlates with success and happiness. But people didn't realize it's autocorrelative. They thought as if I have high self-esteem, therefore I'll be successful. So we started giving trophies for participation. That's not how you get self-esteem. And we can't give it. We can't give the trophies to give them self-esteem. We cannot make our children's friends for them or micromanage their friendships. We cannot successfully double as our child's agent, coach in sports. I mean, you could coach the team, but if you don't believe me, read Andre Agassi's book. It's not good when you're trying to be everything to your child's sporting endeavors. We cannot be the child's second family. I won't go into this in detail, but every child needs somebody, some group of adults other than mom and dad who they can kind of connect with, that give them an idea of what it's like to be an adult other than just mom and dad. We cannot compete with or limit our children's total immersion in online, digital, and social media. We cannot keep them perfectly safe, but we can drive them crazy trying. And the last one is that we cannot make them independent. You get independent by being independent. Right, so less is more. Sometimes the right thing to do is Oh, I'm really struggling with the science fair project. Oh boy, better get to it. And sometimes just not being there, not being part of every single experience is what they need. He likes to do this experiment where he says, think about your sweetest memory from youth. Favorite memory from when you were a kid. You got something? Were your parents there? Yeah, he says about 1 in 5 will either be a Christmas or a Thanksgiving or some big kind of reunion. But generally it's that triumph on the sport field, or that walk by yourself, or that first time you discovered you could get up on water skis. It's something where I'm doing something myself. That kind of sense of expanding capability gives you a real reward. Okay, so less is more. The second one is the key to success might be some failure. There's a book that just came out called How Children Succeed. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. It's written by a guy named Paul Tough, T-O-U-G-H. I also recommend Michael Thompson's book. But what Paul Tough has done is he's basically pulled together all the research on how children learn and how children succeed. And what he's found, or what the different studies have found, is that we have approached a lot of education slightly incorrectly. We've pretty much bought into what he calls the cognitive model. That intelligence is static, and it's the most important thing. Test scores are really what's going to predict for success. And it turns out that's not right. And I'll shorten what is a very long book. Actually, there's a good article written in the New York Times Sunday section from last September that he wrote before the book came out, and it's called What If the Key to Success is Failure, I believe. Something along those lines. But it started when the KIPP school people, are y'all familiar with KIPP? Knowledge is power. This is the grabbing kids mostly from lower socioeconomic minority groups whose parents did not go to college and getting them to all get into college. What they're finding, though, is they, instead of graduating, only 31% of their kids graduate, which was still 4 times the national average within their socioeconomic gathering group. But they didn't want 4 times more. They wanted 20 times more. But they're also out there with Riverdale Academy, which is one of the $38,000 a year New York prep schools. And neither one of these headmasters were able to predict which of their students would do well in college. It was driving them both crazy. So what they did is they got together with a guy named Martin Seligman, who is the father of positive psychology, and it has taught us that we can make ourselves more optimistic. We can approach the world in such a way that we can rewire our brains to make ourselves more effective. And Seligman and a research assistant did a big study, and I won't bore you with the details. The gist of it is the most important attribute, whether or not you'll be successful through college, is grit. Perseverance, resilience is almost nothing to do with your IQ. If you are willing to get knocked down on your butt and get back up again, time and time and time again, you're going to be fine. The problem here is if what we're doing is every time our child's about to fall on their butt, we're throwing a pillow underneath them, how do they ever know they can be okay without us? In fact, the more you do that, there is a message hidden in there. If every time you try to do something and you're about to fail, I save you, what's the message? You can't do it. You need saving. Or failure is so cataclysmic that I've got to keep it from happening to you. Now, this is great. You protected your child from any pain whatsoever, which is great if they're never going to go to college. But they're going to go to college, and suddenly they're going to have a teacher they don't like, they're going to have a struggle, they're just going to be away from home, and they're not going to have the mechanism by which to cope. And they will struggle and struggle mightily. Or they'll be calling you to have you talk to their professor. All right, so these are kind of these 2 trends. And these trends are happening, and they're happening more and more every year. By the way, I will note there are other parenting issues, but that are even more important. They're very heavily covered in Paul Tough's book, but has more to do with how we can help the economically disadvantaged families. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about more of the kind of families that are going to Parish than families who are inner city Detroit. And there are big, 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 big problems there. I'm just not talking about them in this talk. but I'm not saying they're not important. Okay, I'm not saying these are the only parenting problems out there, but the ones that are real within the population that I see a great deal. Okay, so you've got technology that's eroding our 21st century skills, our ability to have interpersonal communications, these face-to-face connections. We're also eroding our grit and our resilience. Okay, so where does camp come into the equation? Well, I think camp ends up being a great partner for parents because there are certain things that makes camp different. And I was going to say there are 3, but they're actually kind of 4. Okay, the 4th, I'll put up front, is camp is fun. Now, the downside of this is why it took us 150 years to realize what we're doing. Because if I gave you a piece of food and you put it in your mouth and it was the most luscious, wonderful thing you've ever eaten, what do you know about it? It's not good for you. Exactly. You absolutely know it can't possibly be good for you. So what if something you go and do and it is a blast and you have lifelong friends and you're having fun? How can it possibly be good for you? It's got to be just like really, really good cheesecake. Tastes good, not so good. So I think we were kind of content to do that, knowing we're sort of doing good work, but not really breaking it down. But the fact that it's fun is very important. Okay, so here are the other 3 things. Number 1 that makes camp really powerful and really neat is that you're not there. But we are. What I like to tell parents, and not just our camp, any really good quality camp, is that we love your children almost as much as you do, but we watch them better. Right? You let your kids play outside without you watching them? I don't let your kids play outside without watching them. I don't watch them go to the bathroom. I don't watch them shower, but the rest of the time someone's watching them. Right? That's part of what camp is. But in the child's mind, you're not there. My friends, I've chosen for myself. When I got to the top of the climbing wall, that's my success. When I chose to try some new foods, that's my decision. My successes are my triumphs. And Susie likes to say that self-esteem, confidence comes from competence. I become more confident and I get increased self-esteem when I overcome challenges, when I develop skills, when I am more capable than I used to be. And every one of those accomplishments, be it my friends, be it my activities, are all done outside of your shadow. So they are mine. And it develops it. Since that independence we can't give them, they're developing. They're going to be happy because when you accomplish things, you're happy. About half that list gets covered. You're not there. But we are. Second one is that the best camps are tech-free, and even some other camps are at least tech-mitigated. In other words, it's an environment where we're not spending 53 hours a week frozen to electronic screen. And I don't even want to know what the numbers are in the summertime in places where their kids aren't in school but they're in the house. But suddenly, there's nothing. There's no Game Boy, there's no gaming system, there's no internet, there's no television, there's no phone, no text. So what happens when all these things go away? Old-fashioned years. We talk eye to eye. I joke with my parents that you might know what the top of your daughter's part looks like, but I know what color her eyes are. Because at home, she's doing this. At camp, she's doing this. You're laughing. You're going and making up a game, which is, remember, collaboration and the communication skills. You're going in and doing constructive, non-supervised play. You're laughing so much that you think you got to go to the bathroom. These are the kind of things you end up doing, walking arm in arm. Just walking quiet with your own thoughts. And you give them the ability to have experience in their body of being really connected. Here's my problem with technology. And once again, I love technology. But 10 years ago, 12 years ago, someone gave me a pile of discs, back when they did the hard floppy disks, and it had Doom, the video game, on it. And I stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 consecutive days playing Doom. And I would get that kind of dirty, oh my gosh, I need to go to sleep. What am I doing? What? I'm a grown man. At least I thought I was. I'm playing Doom. Oh, just got the next level. And I get a little drop of endorphins, a feeling of accomplishment that will hold me through the next level. If you don't think the game designers understand that, I'm going to suggest you're a little naive. They know they're very, very good at giving you just enough to make you keep going. How many times have any of you thought, I ought to go outside, or I need to call my friend, or I need to go to bed, but you just click over one more time to see if there's something over at showtime. And then an hour and a half later, you're going, well, that was kind of funny, but it's now 1:30, and I'm going to be sleep deprived the next day. The technology is kind of insidious, but we feel better when it's not there. I love when I go on ski vacations. The 22 weeks I was traveling the world, unbelievably fantastic experience with my kids. But when we get back, it's hard not to turn the TV on. Camp is like this 22 weeks. Okay, so it's tech-free. That's the second thing. The third thing is camp is a vaccination for failure. Okay, this doesn't quite make sense, so let me explain what my thought process is. My initial, what I wanted to say, but my wife vetoed it, is that come to camp, it's a great place to fail. She thought this was not a very good slogan. But my idea is, it is hard for us to see our children have pain or struggle. Add on to it is that some of the failures available to us go on their permanent record. We really can't let them fail chemistry. We really can't let them fail math. We're really kind of worried that if they don't make that right sports team, how does that project into their future? So on one hand, we understand that I can't fight all the battles for them, and on the other hand, but what if they end up not being able to get into good school because they got a bad grade in 8th grade, and they think she's a bad math student? There's all kinds of things that make failure very, very scary to us. Camp is full of little failures, but partly because it is so fun, they don't feel as bad. And this is why I said it's kind of like a vaccination. I assume that most of us here are vaccinated against whooping cough, polio, and smallpox. The way it happened is we were given a little bit of each of these things. So we managed to get the benefit of being inoculated without actually having to have smallpox, whooping cough, or polio. I kind of feel that's what's happening at camp, is we get just a little bit of feeling of these little mini failures, these little challenges. But we're having so much fun we don't quite notice. Now, what are the failures? We tried hard, but we didn't win inspection. Not on your permanent record. I couldn't get up on skis, and some other kids could. I didn't get to the top of the climbing wall because I'm scared. I can't get along with 2 of these kids in the cabin. But then, with good counselors, with good processing, we then help them get back up and learn to ski, get to the top of the climbing wall, resolve the conflict, actually pull together and win cabin inspection, which might be the hardest one of a lot if you've got young boys. But the idea is that you're trying to give them these successes, and once having had the failure, not particularly important, but a real one, and then succeeded, I'm more capable than I ever thought. Perhaps the biggest challenge is just being away from home. We've lived in a society that tells our children that they're only safe in mommy's shadow. We've told them when they were very little, don't run off, look out for strangers. And then you say, hey, oh, by the way, but I'm going to send you away to strangers for 3 weeks. How does that sound? And they think you're crazy. You show up, you think, oh my gosh, do I have the goods? And then lo and behold, you realize you do. And you are now independent and stronger than you ever thought you could be. So ultimately, I can almost argue that camp is like a boot camp for 21st century skills and to cultivate grit. So I'm going to tell you 2 quick stories and conclude, and then we'll do any questions and answers. Okay, first is the Mighty Mouse story. The second is the Barnacle Boy story. Not all my stories require alliteration. These 2 just happen to. The Mighty Mouse story. I grew up in Midland, Texas. And I was the younger brother of the local high school football star. This is the district that had Odessa Permian and Midland Lee in it. And my older brother was all-district center at age 5. He was 5'8" and 135 pounds. He blocked guys twice his weight. So his nickname was Mighty Mouse. The winning homecoming parade float had a 16-foot Mighty Mouse with my brother's jersey on it. It was great for him. But not great if everyone wants you to be the next Mighty Mouse. Particularly not when you're a chronic asthmatic who's allergic to Bermuda grass. Right? So I had asthma attacks all the time. I could have those. I was used to those. But what I wasn't used to was people looking at me like, so I go, say, Mommy, am I as good as Bo? And Mommy says, of course you are, sweetheart. And I assume she's lying. Because it's her job. Everyone else is looking at me like I'm a failure. The only two people in the world who are kind of paid to say I'm okay or saying I'm okay, that's not really good evidence, right? You're not going to win in a court of law with that. That's when they sent me to camp. I did not want to go. I was sure I didn't have the goods to be without my parents for 5 weeks at age 8. And when I showed up like this, a young man comes down. And this is one of the more important moments of my life. And he drops down on one knee, gets down like this, makes eye contact, says, "Hi, Steve, I'm Bill. You know, I get to be your counselor. The rest of the guys are back in the cabin. We've been waiting for you to show up all day long. But now that you're here, we're going to have the best summer ever. Hey, let's go play." And for the next 5 weeks, he sent the message that this 19-year-old superstar's life had been complete because the asthmatic 8-year-old was in it. Now, let me talk about, just take a step back here for a second. What kind of communication skills did he show right there? He gave me 5 minutes to give to love and validation. That's a skill. He gave me validation. He gave me happiness. He gave me confidence, because as I went through everything, I did write one of the better homesick letters ever. But I got on the other side of it. And camp became incredibly important to me. Second story is Barnacle Boy. Now, this is my caveat. The child I'm about to describe is a 1 in 1,000 camper, okay? But a boy named Evan, older sister's been at camp several years. Older sister loves camp. Mom sends Evan. Evan cries for 21 days. So Evan goes home, and Susan and I go, gosh, we so love Hannah. I'm so sad that it didn't work out for Evan. We would have loved to have him as a camper. Mom says, well, he's coming back next year. And I'm not sure I've ever had this conversation where I'm trying to say, no, it's good. Evan doesn't have to come back to camp. He's fine. This is probably a bad idea. She says, no, he's coming back to camp. I said, you know he cried every day. I mean, not like for a minute or two. He cried every day. She goes, absolutely. And that's why he's going back to camp. I said, okay, I know you'd be a nice person, so tell me what your theory is. She goes, at home, my husband and I call him Barnacle Boy because he will not leave my side. And the vision I have for my son as a young man is a young man that can conquer any challenge. If he's Barnacle Boy, he's not that young man. I know you'll care for him. I know you'll love him. And I know he'll eventually find his capability at camp. Well, last summer, Barnacle Boy was one of 4 kids nominated as the outstanding camper at Camp Champions and read a wonderful letter to us about it. You know, that's grit. I have no doubt, forget it, he's not Barnacle Boy, he's Evan Sir, and Evan Sir is going to do great things. So I'm not going to say camp's the only place to learn these skills or develop grit. I'm not even going to say it's the best place. But I can say a couple things. First, it is the most immersive and intentional environment I know for these skills. I'm not distracted by having to teach algebra or grammar. I'm focusing everything on character, on resilience, on confidence, on interpersonal skills. No, you're never going to get a letter that says I had transformative youth development experience today. They're having fun. I'm a Trojan now, so I'm painted blue. You won't get, in fact, if you get a guy, you'll be lucky if you get a letter. But this is what we're focused on while we're out there being silly and dressing up as tigers and doing all the crazy stuff we do. It's as intentional and an immersive environment as I know of. Second, it is the only environment I know of where you can get 15-year-olds and 10-year-olds to put down their PSPs, log off of Facebook, put down their phones, do so for 3 weeks, and thank you for it. Go through some challenges, and thank you for it. All living in a space a third of the size of this room without air conditioning, and thank you for it. And I think it's because it's when you have real accomplishment and you have real connection that speaks to the soul. That speaks to what we're really meant to be like. And I finally got this wonderful validation at the end of the summer. There's a lovely camper. She's now a junior in high school. I think she's in Houston. And she writes me a letter after her term. It's like a week left in camp. And first of all, it has freaky good handwriting. It's 2 pages, handwritten. And it says, Dear Steve Sir, which is my camp name. Dear Steve Sir, happy No Text Tuesday. And she explains that for the next year, she will not text or receive or send a text on a Tuesday. And then she starts to write about the leadership skills she acquired at camp, the social acumen that she refined at camp, the confidence that she developed at camp, and the knowledge that she can do whatever she wants to do that she learned at camp. And she realized that camp had not taken technology away from her, it merely had taught her to turn it off and turn her own personality on. And that ultimately is what great camps do. They're intentional communities that give children an opportunity to discover who they are, develop the 21st century skills, develop their grit, all while having a good time. So I'm fond of saying that the worst camp in America is still probably better than the best mall. But really, really good camps are like really, really good schools.